Hi, and welcome to Third Floor Views, where we talk about home, health, and living with kids. I'm your host, Janet Jefferson. Today we're here with Amy Clements, and she is a professional gardener. Her company is Designs for Greener Gardens, and we're so lucky because we get to not only talk about gardening and natives, but we also are going to take a tour of her beautiful yard. So it should be really fun. Thank you so much, Amy, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Let's just jump right in. So I want to talk about a few things. I want to talk about gardening in general and about how you make the choices you make. And I want to talk, of course, about your yard. And then I do want to dive into the topic of natives and how you choose what you choose. So first, I'd love to hear just a little bit about you and your background and your business.
Well, I've been a professional gardener for 13 years, and I work for a small company in Annapolis, which has been designing gardens in the area for like 30 years. But I came from this. I was a lobbyist before, so there's absolutely no connection to my former career. But I've always loved gardening, and so it's always been something that I wanted to do. I thought I would do something in the environmental profession, and then I started looking for another job when the recession hit. So I ended up as a gardener, and I've loved it. I also started at the Watershed Stewards Academy, which is the Anne Arundel County Outdoor Education Center, and I'm a Master Watershed Steward. So that's another piece of the gardening kind of, but it's sort of another direction that I've taken in the gardening world too.
So with that, I'm sure becoming a watershed steward has changed maybe your decisions that you've been making in your own yard. Like I know that your yard here is a certified wildlife habitat, and I want to jump into that topic of natives because I think for a lot of gardeners, it's a bit of a struggle, and we want to support natives and are really excited by that idea. But then how to make those choices? So first off, I wanted to ask why. Why are natives important? Why should we be planting more natives?
Well, natives are important for several reasons. They're certainly important for the beneficial insects, which we all rely on, which we need for our food sources. And they're also important habitat for birds because, birds choose them to eat the seeds and the fruit and the nuts and the flowers. And they're supposedly easier care for people because when people hear native, you think, it's always grown here, therefore I don't really have to do anything special to it. That's not the case, unfortunately. I mean, it could be the case.
Yeah.
You could have a totally native, you drive by many totally native, well, I don't know about today if they're totally native, but many, native areas which are totally unmaintained and unmanaged, and they're wonderful for habitat, wonderful for wildlife, but maybe we couldn't live there because it's a little too wild. So natives are incredibly important and have become much more of a big deal in the last 20 years, I would say. And there has been a lot more focus on them, which has been wonderful because then there's more of them for sale. Nurseries are offering them more, mail order nurseries and local and even the box stores will have native departments because they know lots of people read about it and hear about it and think, oh, I'm supposed to be planting natives. So, so it's a great thing all around because the more people that want them, the more they will be available.
So in terms of care, if you do need to take care of them, how do you go about that? And is it different than maybe your typical garden plant, or is it similar in the fact that you just sort of, you learn about it, you do your research, you read the directions, and then you follow it. What is your sort of recommendation for how to care for native plants?
It is basically the same as any plant.
Okay.
So it's not, you can't you could say, I'm just going to plant that in the ground and let it grow and see what it does. And maybe it'll do beautifully. If you have the right soil and you have the right water and you have the right temperatures and, you know, everything's perfect in the world, then you won't need to maintain it. But that doesn't typically happen. You know, every plant, every garden, every tree, everything needs some kind of maintenance in our gardens because you know, our gardens are not natural wild areas. There's not you know, you don't have all the tree cover, we don't have the forest to protect everything. And so I would say as far as maintenance, the low maintenance idea of natives is that they're adapted to our soils and they're adapted to our temperature and our water levels, you know, that changes all the time. But basically, it's what's come to live in this area and it's comfortable here and it grows. The temperatures are good, you know, they know when the frost hits. And so I would say basically a native is easier maintenance in that regard.
Gotcha.
Because you don't have to worry about, oh, is the frost going to kill it or is it going to, you know, are the animals going to chew it all down? So typically that's what.
So they are less care. Yeah.
Less care in that way.
Gotcha.
Yes. Yep.
What about challenges? Are there any particular challenges that native plants present that are maybe different from your average garden plant?
Well, like many plants, natives can also take over. So, you know, you could I mean, any native, it doesn't become an invasive. You don't call it an invasive because it's native to the area. But we call it very happy. When plants are like too happy in your garden, whether it's a native or a non-native, it can be a problem that way. But, you know, if you have a grass, like a native grass, it shouldn't be an issue because it learns to live well with other plants. And so, you know, if you have a huge native plant, which I have on the other side of the house, Silphium, it's called, and it's a wonderful native, but it grows in the bricks, it comes up, it spreads everywhere, and it's very hard to get rid of. So some natives, that's an issue too.
Yeah,
you know,
so
if you
maybe they're a
don't
little more
want them,
aggressive.
yes, so you should do all your research, whether you're buying native plants or non-native plants, to see if it works in your garden.
That makes sense. It's always a good idea to plan ahead. Can you mix native plants with either ornamentals or like a vegetable garden and still get the benefits that native plants can provide to the environment?
Yes. So a lot of non-natives also provide food for pollinators. I plant a lot of herbs, so I do parsley and I do cilantro, and if you let those, they're not native, but if you let them go to seed, then the pollinators love the seeds and the flowers on that. And I have lots of thyme in my garden, and which is flowering now, and the pollinators love it. So, like, you know, they'll go to other plants that are non-native. It's just there are some specific pollinators that need specific native plants. So, you know, if you want monarchs, you have to have Asclepias, you have to have milkweed. And if you want a specific pollinator in your garden, you know, there are some plants that only one specific pollinator will go to, or, you know, one pollinator needs that specific plant. So we have a large mix of non-natives. We moved into this garden. It was already an established garden. It's changed a lot, but there were probably no natives in the garden when we moved in. And so now that I've learned more about them over the years, we've incorporated a lot of natives, but I still plant a lot of non-natives and use tropicals, and I have a vegetable garden that I plant flowers in. And so I think it's an easier way to garden if you can mix the two.
Gotcha.
Because there's a lot more non-natives available to buy. And also there's so many beautiful plants out there, and people want beautiful gardens.
Right.
So if you can incorporate as many natives as possible into your garden, that's, you know, a wonderful thing for our planet.
Let's talk a little bit about cultivars. So I know in terms of natives, you want to plant native plants and that's going to be the best. But I've heard a lot of things like you go to a big box store and you're like, oh, great, here's
Right.
echinacea or coneflower, which is a native. But then you'll see that it's like a very specific kind. Maybe it's been bred to be a different color than the typical coneflower. Is that going to provide the same benefits as your true native? Or are they not the same?
It does not provide the same, and
Okay.
I'm sure you know Mount Cuba, which is done. It does these research studies on specific plants. So they've done research studies on echinacea and on hydrangeas and on baptisias and all kinds of plants to see which one. They follow them over a number of years to see which ones actually attract the most pollinators, and have found that like the fluffier and the fuller a flower is, such as an echinacea, they've made them so they're doubles and they're
Right.
all these and the
So beautiful blooms.
beautiful. But the pollinators don't like them. They like the
Interesting.
single flat, or maybe some specific thing of the original of the native.
Right.
And when you add like too many layers and too many bracts, they become, and also becomes more sterile. And so, I have some cultivars in my garden, which when I put them in, I thought these were natives.
Right.
I mean, they were classified as natives.
Right.
But come to find out, they're not. They don't have the same benefits because there's just something a little off about them. So, a lot of stores. And it's a hard thing because you really have to do a lot of research to find that out.
Right.
And to find out which is the exact one. And some cultivars have a lot of benefits,
Right.
and some cultivars don't. So
Oh.
it's a very complicated science out there.
So with that, do you have any recommendations on resources on where your sort of average citizen could go to learn about making good choices, or at least making informed choices? Like I know, like I'm putting in this plant, I know
Right.
it's a non-native, but I'm making an informed decision when I'm doing it. Or I'm seeking out a native and I know it's a true native, it's not a cultivar, and I trust, where it's come from.
Right.
How does someone go about finding out that information? Or how do you go about finding out that information?
Well, I would say Mount Cuba, which
Okay.
is a beautiful garden and research center in Delaware, is wonderful.
So fairly
for that.
local.
Very local, yes. And they do all research on that, and their whole garden is native. And they have ornamental gardens, which are native, and like formal gardens, which are planted with all natives. I think
So
they
you can
use
also
some
get
cultivars.
beautiful flowers
Yes.
just from natives.
Yes.
So it is possible.
It is possible. It is possible. They do have gardeners to take care of them,
Right.
to watch, and they have a lot of staff. But that's a wonderful resource for that. There's Doug Tallamy, who everybody we all love because he's the oak guy who talks about the need for and the beauty of and the desire for oaks, and he writes a lot about natives. So if you want true natives, if you want everything about true natives, you could go to those two sources,
Okay,
because they will
great.
tell you everything about the natives. But Mount Cuba will also tell you about the cultivars, and some of the cultivars, like from the echinacea plant, which are still good for pollinators. Maybe they're not as good, but they are, they're very good. And so, you sort of have to balance. There's so many websites and there's so many places out there to find this information, and that I think if you just Google Mid-Atlantic, National Wildlife Federation does a lot. Your cooperative extension services, every county has a cooperative extension service. There's native plant societies. There's Maryland. I think there might be an Anne Arundel County Native Plant Society. So it could be very local. And native people get very local because they want a specific, it was from Annapolis. And, so there are a lot of resources out there for people who want to find out about these.
That's really helpful. One more topic I want to talk about before we take a tour is that you are wildlife certified habitat here in your yard. What does that process entail? How did you decide to do it? And then, and what did it actually look like to achieve it?
Well, I heard about it, and I think I must have read about it in one of my magazines, and so decided to go for it. And you have to say that you provide shelter for birds and butterflies and pollinators, and you provide food and water.
Okay.
And so you're not supposed to use pesticides in your garden. So it's supposed to basically an organic or ornamental, or maybe not ornamental garden, but mine is an ornamental garden. And so once you do that, you write it up and you submit it to them and they approve it. And I don't know, no one comes to look. No one comes to check to see if it's really wildlife certified. But so many people ask me about it when they walk by. Yes, so it's really nice because it's created a lot of interest, and a lot of people have wanted to know what that is, what that means. So that part of it's fun.
When you say write it up, how involved is that? Do you have to actually document every single plant in your garden?
No, you don't. I think you have to have, I did it years ago, so I'm trying to remember, but I think it has to be a percentage of plants should be native, and what you're supposed to do is, I don't know that they ask you for native, but they ask if it provides food. So typically that would be something native, or something with seeds or fruits, or something like that, that's going to, the flowers are going to provide some nourishment for the birds and the butterflies. I mean, I guess you could say we have a fig tree out front, and I mean, the squirrels and the birds eat figs, so I guess they would count that as food, even though it's not native. But yeah, so it's not too involved. At least it was not when I did it maybe 10 years ago. So, but it's a nice process, and it's a lovely thing, a lovely conversation piece for people, and it draws more people into the whole conversation of providing habitat.
That's great. And I can see that being a great way too to get kids more involved and families more involved, thinking about, okay, how can we make our space, no matter how big or small, more welcoming to wildlife, and going through those steps of thinking about homes and water sources and food sources. I think a lot of kids could really be attracted to that. So it could be a nice way to get more into gardening and even playing more outside.
And we've been feeding the birds a lot.
I know, the cicadas, they're here.
And understand the importance of water. So providing water for birds, but also for bees and for all kinds of pollinators too. Need water sources. Right. Some need like running water. We don't have running water, but misting water. Hummingbirds like misting water. So providing fresh water every day is really important too.
Yeah, so I could see that, because you need that to survive.
Right, we all need water.
Well, thank you so much, Amy Clements, for joining me today to chat about natives and wildlife and gardening in general. And I'm really excited now to take a tour of the yard so we can head in that direction. So here we are with Amy Clements, and we're going to dive into our garden tour. So Amy, we're going to start here and head through this very beautiful gate and start the exploration.
Okay, great. So we're going under a crepe myrtle alley. Everyone knows crepe myrtles. They were here in the garden, and so since most of what was here was not native plants, we decided to make this side a mostly native garden, and planted, these are fothergillas, which is a beautiful, wonderful shrub that blooms early. You can see the little spent blooms on there. It blooms early in the spring and then gets wonderful fall color. So it's a great plant, great for pollinators, very happy in these kind of high shade area. We have a baptisia back here, which is just got a few little blooms on them. I have more baptisias in the garden. This one won't go away. I keep moving it to other spots, but it keeps coming back in this area. So it's a very happy plant here. And down here are inkberries, which is a lot of people's native
Boxwood equivalent.
native boxwood equivalent, yes. So you can prune them. I do prune them down some, so people can prune them because they grow up from the base still. And this is it's a very lovely glossy leafed plant. So it's kind of a formal looking native shrub, which a lot of people are always looking for. So
Right.
that's a great alternative, and it's got little tiny flowers. You can see the little tiny white flowers in
yeah,
there.
they're so cute.
Yeah. So that's a great one. This is my trough where I plant tropicals and all. This is a yellowwood tree, which we planted about 8 years ago. It's just finished blooming. It was gorgeous. And I planted it because it's known as a great tree for climbing. So I always thought for our grandkids, or so if people are looking for a beautiful tree for their yard, and they have kids, it's a wonderful plant. It's a pretty fast growing because this has grown this much in about 8 years.
Oh, wow.
And it's very strong. Has beautiful white flowers in the spring and beautiful yellow color in the fall too. So.
And it's called a yellowwood.
Yellowwood. And then this is a oak leaf hydrangea, which is another native. This is a cultivar, but because it's small and but. Again, that cultivar native conversation. And here I've planted some native carex, which is called Carex pennsylvanica.
And that's the grass?
This is the little grass. And this is another alternative that people could use. They say you could use it as an alternative to grass, but
Can you mow it?
You can't mow it.
Okay.
You're not supposed to mow it. So it's just a soft, very nice, really nice carex ground cover. And so I just planted that last year. So I didn't know how it was going to work because I didn't know if it was too dry or too hot here, but right now it looks really good. So I'm very happy with that. And I have some blueberries.
Oh, fun.
Oh, I have blueberries over there too. I never get blueberries really, but we do have I'm moving around a lot, but we do have a lot of blueberries on here.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can see all the berries.
Yeah. The birds typically get them because I don't put nets over them, but that's okay. We want to feed the birds.
And then this looks like some fruit as well.
So this is a pear.
Oh,
This
nice.
is called an espaliered pear because it was planted to grow on this. This was also here, and so we do get a lot of pears on this. I've tried one. I've eaten one, but it wasn't very good, and I don't know the timing of pears, but typically the birds or the squirrels get them all. So, again, part of the wildlife habitat.
Right,
So.
exactly.
So we can walk back towards our vegetable garden.
So one of the things we talked about before was water, a water source. Now a pool, you're going to have chlorine in it. How does that work? And then in terms of wildlife, are you seeing that as potentially dangerous for wildlife? Is sort of like a neutral aspect, or is it actually helpful?
I believe I don't know. I don't think it's helpful.
Okay.
But I don't know. Believe that it's harmful. So I would guess that it's a neutral aspect for wildlife.
Gotcha.
We put other sources of water around
Okay.
so that they don't, dragonflies swoop down in the pool, and of course you see other creatures in the pool sometimes, but I don't think of it as, hopefully they're not drinking the water.
Right.
Although we see lots of ducks in the pool.
Oh, funny. Yeah. That's so funny. Now this is stunning.
This is a beautiful cultivar but of a native, which is mock orange.
Oh.
And it smells fabulous.
Almost
and,
like a honeysuckle.
Yes, it's like
very
it's
sweet
an orange.
smell. It's
It's
lovely.
like in the mock orange, so it's in the orange.
And big
citrusy,
white
jasmine.
blossoms.
Yeah, very beautiful tree, which you can prune down and make it short. They have different. I grew up with a mock orange, which is why I planted it, because it was my mom's favorite. So, but it's a very lovely plant that flowers right now around this time, and then it stops flowering. It flowers for a couple of weeks.
Gotcha.
Which most plants do. You know, a lot of people want a plant that flowers the entire summer. And there are very few, except for annuals, very few plants that flower for that long of a time. So we just enjoy them for the time that they're flowering. So.
Absolutely.
And in here we have lots of a baptisia, another cultivar of a baptisia, but and back there is can I look it up?
Oh,
I forget my own the names of my own plants sometimes. And I planted this last year. Oh, Culver's root, right. It's Veronicastrum, and I got it from the Thomas Jefferson, from Monticello.
Oh, fun.
Garden there, and it's supposed to spread. It's a wonderful pollinator plant too. So it gets very tall and with a little purple, like candelabra type flowers on it.
Pretty.
So, and I have dill in here, so I try to mix this is dill, and you can see the real feathery. I try to mix vegetables and herbs and flowers and everything all together, so makes it a little fun for everyone. This is my working space, so sorry.
It is a beautiful working space.
My plant's still to be planted.
I love it.
So this is kind of fun. This is a bayberry, which is a native.
A great
Wonderful,
smell.
yeah, wonderful smell. We had 4 of them here. I'm not sure that this is the perfect spot for them, but I keep trying. So this one looks pretty good. But this is a pomegranate tree
No way.
that I got at the Peka Gardens about 6 years ago. And I just saw this morning that there are little pomegranates on there.
Oh, those are beautiful. Bright red already.
Right.
Glossy little
Definitely
fruits.
not a native, not a native to here.
Right,
so,
right.
But it's so much fun that it's lived, and that it's just a different kind of, it's fun to have fruit trees.
Yeah.
I would love to. I've never gotten I've only seen one pomegranate on here before, so this is pretty exciting
Yeah,
this
I
year.
see a bunch.
Right, I
These
do too.
fruits all over the place.
I know. We'll see if oh yeah, they're all up there. Oh, maybe we'll get a pomegranate. That would be very exciting. And so over here, then I incorporate, this is my tomato patch. But I put, I put flowers and herbs, and there's all kinds of, and this is a little tiny marigold, which is very attractive to all the pollinators. They do love the marigolds, and it's.
I know we have a pollinator right now.
Yes, we do. Thanks
boy
for showing up for the party. And I have Joe Pye Weedle in the back there. It's just starting to come up, which is also another great plant.
Right now it's maybe about knee height, but it grows really tall.
Yeah,
right?
it does. It does grow really tall. And I just
great
lost a
pollinator
tree
plant.
in the back here, so I just had to take that down. But I've tried another tomato plant back here to grow up that trellis.
Oh yeah.
And so it's just kind of fun to mix.
Right.
So I encourage everybody to have fun. If you're planting your tomatoes, there's no reason that you can't put some flowers in there too.
Right, and it's probably
Yes.
going to make better, healthier tomatoes because you are bringing in those
Right.
pollinators, so you're going to have more fruit potentially because of that. So
That's right.
planting is.
Yeah, and all these flowers, like they might not be natives. I do have natives back in the back that I've just planted, which are not doing much yet. But even the non-natives do bring pollinators because the bees still love them. At least some of the bees love some of them. So I think that mixing everything together is always a wonderful way to bring habitat into your garden.
Definitely.
This is our utilitarian section, but we do have new, these are called rain tanks instead of rain barrels.
Beautiful.
They're made in Texas. We just put them in, so we haven't installed them, attached them to the downspout yet.
Great.
But we used to have small rain barrels here, and it just, it wasn't enough to capture the water. So yeah, they're very beautiful. And
Really?
it's great for next to your home in an area like this, which already has all the work pieces of a
Right,
home,
right.
heat pumps and all this kind of stuff. So it's nice to have something that looks great too.
So do you primarily, or will you primarily use this to water the garden?
Well, to water as much of it as possible. So
Gotcha.
you can attach a hose to the bottom. Unfortunately, it's on the side that doesn't have a ton of garden, although this will need this all needs watering too. This is a native Amsonia,
Oh, it's
which is a
beautiful.
lovely
Little star flowers.
Yes, lovely plant too. So we will use the hose attached to there or a watering can. We don't know how that's all going to work out yet. So.
So one of the big takeaways I'm getting is how constantly you are changing things and
Yes.
moving plants around, experimenting, playing with even new technologies, whether that be a rain barrel or what, but playing with your garden. And I think so often people think like, oh, it's a garden is such a static thing. I plant something and then I walk away. But that's not true.
No, because things go.
Right.
Things come and go. Nothing. I mean, you hope that trees last for a very long time, but shrubs and plants and flowers, I mean, there is a lifespan to them, and depending on the weather, the conditions, how well they're maintained, how much they like their spot, they will, could live for many, many years, or it could go away in a couple of years. So it's kind of an opportunity to put something new or try something different. Even though, it might be frustrating sometimes, but it's they're living things.
Right.
So they're not static. This is the cup plant I was telling you about, Silphium, which is a native. It grows about this tall.
Oh my goodness.
And then has these little yellow flowers that come off. But it's called the cup plant because their leaves collect water.
Huh.
And the birds will come and sit on the leaves and drink the water out of them. So and we see it right through our windows here, our dining room windows. So you can sit there and watch the birds sit there and drink the water out of the leaves. So.
Yeah, you can really see how there are these little cups, these really little bowls that could collect a lot of water.
It's a wonderful, but this is a very happy plant. So it grows up, it comes up through the brick.
Oh my goodness.
It even comes up through our wood pile. It moved under our wood pile because it's on this side now too. So
gotcha. So a little bit aggressive.
Yeah, it's a little aggressive. Here's another native, and I read about this at Mount Cuba, and it's an aster called bluebird aster, which they said was one of the best asters. It's looking very thirsty right now, but it's really a good pollinator plant. It's not the native aster, but it is a wonderful pollinator plant, and it stands nice and tall and straight and doesn't need staking. And so those are things that are important in gardens, for people that want
Less work.
Gardens, yes, much less work. So it's a very lovely plant. This one is. And these are all erixes, which are native sedges along the side here.
Gotcha.
Which is a great ground cover. This is a pretty little native called galinia. I think it's a meadow plant.
Huh.
It doesn't spread, it doesn't move around. I had sort of hoped it would move around somewhere in my garden, but that's okay.
So it sounds like you're also always learning about the different characteristics of plants and learning how they move. And it's going to be different in everyone's garden, right? Because the soil's different, the light's different.
Right.
So it's all an experiment.
It's very much an experiment. Yes, it is. So this is our garden, which was an established garden. We've added to it, all the structural plants were here, the hollies and the magnolias, and most of the big plants were here. And so we've added pockets of natives, but also pockets of non-natives, and lots of, since this is the most visible part of the garden, it's been kind of fun just to play with it. And so we try to make sure there's always water, and we try to do a lot of things that would attract a lot of interest from creatures and from people. So
yeah.
So because people love to talk about their gardens, and
Right.
I love to talk about my gardens with people who walk by on the street. So
Definitely.
it is a lot of fun.
It is beautiful. Let's just walk down a little bit. I'd love to get just see the front presentation of your garden because it is a showstopper. As you said, people do stop as they walk along, and you know, it's not all natives, but it's really, really beautiful, and I think it's worth highlighting.
Oh, thank you.
And then I see a little bit of just a bowl with water.
Right.
Is that a great example of?
Yes.
a
Yeah,
water
you can
source?
just leave water because a lot of animals, a lot of creatures need water to be close to the ground, and so we have it out back for our birds because we have another water feeder over here on the other side of the fig tree too, just to have them in different spaces and trying to remember to fill them.
Right.
That's
right.
always the hard part. You think, oh my gosh, that's right. We do have those.
This is just beautiful. I love the balance on either side of the walkway, of the just burst of white. It's so happy and cheerful.
So this is from seed.
Oh my gosh,
This
that's
all
incredible.
showed up from seeds, and it's an annual, but obviously it reseeds and grows back because a lot of this, I seeded it 2 years ago, and some came last year, and so a lot more came this year. So it's a fun way seeds are a wonderful thing to use because
Right.
they're so cheap and you don't know exactly what's going to happen with them.
A great experimentation.
So it's a lot of fun to
Definitely.
do that. This is called orlaia.
It's beautiful.
It is really a fun plant. And there's all kinds of things like in here, all kinds of natives. There's little native geraniums, and there's orangium. There's just stuff like sort of splashed around inside. Some Amsonia over there, the blue flowered Amsonia. And so we wanted to mix the natives. There's a lot of echinacea in here too. Lots of echinacea on this side especially, mixed in with all the other
And then that
others.
will give you continuous color
Right.
as well.
Yes.
So as the spring dies down and we move into summer, that's when you're going to get some of that echinacea blooming and different
Yes.
things. So you'll just
Right.
get these waves of new plants.
Yeah,
coming
it's
and going.
fun because then you forget what you have too. You know, in a
Right.
garden like this that's so full, you think, oh, where'd that even come from?
Right,
I
right.
think things have come from your mom's garden here. She thought that
It's good to
they-
share
they
with
traveled,
neighbors.
Right. It traveled up here, so
That's so funny.
yeah, so it's a lot of fun to have a mix in your garden. It does make it much more fun than trying to be, totally specific to just one cultivar. I mean, I like roses, but I don't want a rose garden.
Right,
Right.
right.
Just a rose garden. It's not very interesting to me, and it's really of not much use to any pollinators. But it's fun to have a few rose bushes too, mixed in with all the other plants that you love. So, and here's I do have parsley that I grew along the fence here.
Oh, I love it.
I've
Great
been
for
cutting it
caterpillars.
now, but yeah, it's great for caterpillars. And then, and it's great in the seeds. Then some of the pollinators eat the seeds. I have to reseed again to get some more for next year. So, and then the magnolias is actually a native. The Magnolia grandiflora is a southern magnolia, so native really more to the farther south, but
Sort of we're right on the border here.
yeah, so I'm not sure who likes magnolias, I don't know if somebody likes the flower. I mean, it's got gorgeous flowers and cones, and so there's lots of seeds in the cones when the cones are created. So obviously there are creatures eating it. I don't see them there, so I don't know what they're, who the magnolias help.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, for talking with us today and for sharing your beautiful garden. It's just stunning here. It's clearly a work of art, and I can see all the love and passion that goes into it. Thank you also to all of our viewers and listeners for joining us on this awesome garden tour with Amy Clements. Make sure that you do visit ChesapeakeFamily.com for up-to-date home, health, and education information for local Maryland parents. Check out all these archived episodes in video and podcast format at ChesapeakeFamily.com. I'm Janet Jefferson with Chesapeake Family and Third Floor Views. Thank you so much.